just look for panel room Z, and I think it is mythological because I walked every hallway that was on the 3rd floor and did not find a panel room.
Oh, we have not been there yet.
It's probably exciting.
No, you lied to me. You told me it was there. You all lied.
Other elevator.
There's
you
one
get off
on-
the elevator
There's
and
one
there
on,
should be a sign says
on the
go
3rd
up.
floor.
Well, I want to make sure
Well, the
because
elevator I use has no sign.
Yeah.
No
wrong
sign.
elevator.
I would
You're up
recommend
and
a
you used the
sign.
wrong elevator.
Wrong
but
elevator.
you know
Yeah, but everyone's using that elevator.
some of Gail's stories take place in England where the 3rd floor isn't our 3rd floor, so maybe that's where it is.
It's on the 4th floor. Is that what
I
you're
don't know,
saying?
maybe they did it for Victor and the Bully so they know where to go. So hello.
Make sure you find it.
I'm Joe Kennedy, and I'll be moderating this panel with our esteemed writers here. Gail Carriger, welcome to the East Coast.
Thanks. Hi, everybody.
You know, she doesn't get East very often.
I don't, and I'm very happy because I'm 3 hours ahead of y'all. So
Yes, you are.
I can outlast everybody here.
We have Angel Nix, and we have Bert Piedmont. So, and what all of these authors have in common is they definitely have supernatural creatures and supernatural creations and entities from other worlds in their writing, and in all the stuff they enjoy, right? So, in fact, let's start with Gail, as she's come a long way, and she's peppy right now, early in the evening for her.
It's tea time.
It's tea time, right? And she has a beautiful tea bag, by the way, right? So the
On brand.
on brand. So the in your stories, there's a lot of the archetypes like vampires, werewolves,
Yes.
and so they live the regular lives of people, if not exactly a normal life. And there's all the political intrigue you get with everything. So why these characters? Because you can have that political intrigue with just humans,
Sure.
but it's much more interesting when there's
Immortals. monkey
immortals,
the Batch.
right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I come at it as I just wanted to make the monsters that the Victorians believed in, the monsters that actually existed. So every time you travel in my universe, as you do in the later books, you meet new versions of vampires and shapeshifters in different countries because different mythologies are the backgrounds of those countries, right? So that was the first tactic I took. The second tactic is I come out of ancient Greek mythology, so I'm very interested in the attitudes of immortals, and I loved the way the ancient Greeks had their gods very capricious.
Oh yeah.
Because I think if you do live for a very long time, you get bored. And therefore you just muck about with the mayfly lives of the humans,
Right.
because you don't care about them very much. And
Well,
I
the
just
Greek
love
gods
that
certainly
idea.
did that. They looked around. There was a lot of
Yeah.
mucking
There
going
was
on in the
mucking.
ancient Greece stuff.
There's lots of it.
You know, you ever
And-
see the pie chart where it's like all the problems in Greek mythology and like 85% is Zeus couldn't keep
Zeus
it in his
couldn't keep
pants?
it in
You
his
know?
Yeah, so, my supernatural creatures struggle with that side as well. Still find their food sexy, which we're not going to unpack that, but that's basically what's going on. So that was basically how I went with it.
You know, because Greece was mentioned, I'm going to jump over to Bert next. Because Bert, you definitely have some of those creatures. In fact, the cover of Shivers, shameless plug on my part on behalf of Bert. You have mer creatures in your stories. Now, you have a lot of different creatures in your stories, but this in particular is kind of not the Disney-ized version of mer creatures, right? And why introduce them? Because we're all fascinated by the sea. I mean, it's a huge, huge thing in human fiction and literature, right? So.
I wanted to do something different. Like, I'm not really into like that whole Disney-fied, cute, big-eyed mermaid that's all sweet. I wanted to make my mermaids kind of nasty, so I made them half shark instead of half whatever Ariel is. I don't know what kind of fish she's supposed to be. And I gave them, this kind of different sort of intelligence and different sort of, they can mate with sharks or they can mate with humans, and just sort of this whole different backstory. And then I threw in some homages to Jaws, because it takes place in Cape Cod.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, when I write, I come up with something and then I just throw a never-ending series of what-ifs at it until I get something that I like. So it's just like, well, what if this? What if this? What if this? What if this? I mean, originally it was an idea I had. I wanted to write like a sci-fi really bad movie of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love bad movies the week.
yeah, so this was supposed to have Mike Rowe in it.
Oh,
It was supposed to be an episode of Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe. That was like the original thing, and obviously most of that part got dumped.
You know, we're going to come back to that because I want to also explore, and this happens a lot in steampunk, the whole genre, the gas lamp punk and all the rest is that sometimes real people are introduced. And I think I was on one panel with 4 other authors, and everybody had Tesla in their books, right? Like, it's not related to Tesla showing up, right? So, including Jessica there. The Angel, now you also have some supernatural creatures in your book who are not always the friendliest of creatures. There's a lot of stuff going on there, right? Like, you know.
Well, especially in my demon series.
Mhm.
There's only one book out so far. I have the second book half written, but I had to jump back into my Shifter series because that's one that's selling right now. So I kind of, decided to focus on it. But yeah, they're not always the nicest.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do with mine is I take things that happen in real life to people. These happen to my characters. So they go through hell. I put my characters through hell. They go through drama. They go through trauma, but they come through it stronger because I want it to be something that people can relate to.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of interesting thing because Gail, your worlds are, they're definitely Victoriana. They're during that period. There's an aristocracy. There's a whole hierarchy for the vampires, right?
And the werewolves,
And
yeah.
the werewolves, right?
Yep.
And there's the games people play as well because you have all the political intrigue, and sometimes they're at rival odds with each other or really dislike each other intensely, right? So
Yes.
there's rival families, there's rival aristocracies, and there's also kids doing what kids aren't supposed to do, right? So at least some of your characters are like rebellious. They're gonna go their own way. It doesn't matter that the Grand Poobah is telling me I have to do this. I'm gonna do it my own way and try not to let them know about it. So where do you decide to incorporate the intrigue but keep it going because you're telling a supernatural story as well as that? And what did you decide to base your vampires on? Because there's a lot of vampire lore out there, and you got to decide, well, can they go out during the day? Do they see each other in the mirror?
Oh, how do you pick what?
Yeah, how do you pick-
and
how
this is
did
a
you
good
pick
question
what?
for everybody, but how do you
Yeah.
pick which aspects of the history of the monster you use and which aspects you turn
And you introduce some new
yourself?
stuff too,
Yeah,
right?
and
That doesn't-
what novel bits do you add? No. In my case, I went with, because I knew I was going to be using werewolves, and that of course obviously has to be based on wolf pack dynamics to a certain degree. So like, what animal dynamics did I want to base the vampires off of, which is what I went with. And I was like, oh, I really like the idea of giving them a kind of bug, creepy aspect.
Mhm.
So rather than bats, because bats seem too friendly and communal to me. I like bats a lot, and I was like, I want something a little more evil than bats. I went with wasps. The idea, I like the idea of like paper wasps, like nasty wasps. So that informed the break that I was taking from like the traditional aspect.
Oh
of
yeah, that's
vampires.
definitely a
So-
break, right?
And I also wanted something that was very different from how the wolf pack dynamic was going to work. So if it was going to use alpha, beta, gamma, like wolf pack, masculine, patriarchal sort of dynamics, whether honest to the natural history or not, that's what I was going to be using. I wanted to use something that was a matriarchal bent for the vampires. And so wasps again, and the idea of a queen that kind of controls seemed like a good foil as well. So the existence of a set of creatures that I knew I really wanted to play with kind of informed the second set of creatures that I was introducing. And I also wanted the werewolves to be sort of associated with kind of the common man or the everyman, or in this case, the soldier
Right, sure.
class, whereas the vampires were going to be very aristocratic. And so they are going to have, again, I wanted this sort of classisms, because you're dealing with Victorian, class is going to come into it. So I wanted that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, and it really works actually, because not only do you weave the like a Victorian essence into it as a storyline, but you also get to kind of create this dynamic of, and do it quite well, the idea of how you want to framework your society within the society, like where the vampire society fits within Victorian.
And how power relates
Yeah,
to
and
that,
it
right?
does,
Like
right?
how you activate power depending. So like the vampires, because they're aristocratic power, they're interested in control of technology and information flow, and like the kinds of they understand the way power works with the aristocracy. You go for land, like you do all of these things, and you can kind of watch them doing that, which is also wasp-like. The sort of territory of control and access and delegation of power nexus. So you send your drones out to gather things, right? In this case, they often use it for information. So I wanted that as well. Again, to counter the werewolves, which I folded pretty neatly into the regimental system, which I just happen to know quite a bit about. And that one of the things that always interested me about the Victorian regimental system is how very separated the soldier class was during the Victorian era. Like the military was really its own thing. They tended to marry each other. They recruited from within. Like they were really insular, and that just reminded me of a werewolf pack. You know, I was like, oh, that seems to nest really neatly. And I also liked the idea of like the werewolves being sort of
So there's some of
physical.
that art imitating history. Right?
Yeah. Oh well, I fold
Fold
within
it in,
fold
right? Yeah.
all the time. Like now, it's startling to me that the Victorian era did not have werewolves and vampires because it seems to work so well.
It did.
It explains everything.
Men in Black, they arrived early. They hid all the secrets from us. There's plenty of Victorian werewolves and vampires.
Of course there
And Angel, you have quite a number of shifters, right? Stories. I mean,
Yes.
there's shifting going on all over the place, right? So.
Yeah, I have 6 books out with different shifters in it. I have the 7th book coming out actually this month on the 17th. But I don't focus on just wolves. I have wolves, lions, tigers, leopards,
Yeah, like a whole.
jaguars. So I do different species, and I have even one pairing that is a wolf and a tiger pairing. And the way I did that pairing was I had them. He was like, "No, she's a wolf. I'm a tiger. No, it's not possible."
Yeah, cats and dogs living together.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, kind of no, and he's like, and he's Russian, so his reaction was "Nyet, nyet, no, this isn't possible." But they're mates, you know. So that book was all about him coming to terms with them being mates, and he didn't understand how it was possible. And that was another one of those things where I put opposites attract. You know, and that's one of those situations where that can happen in real life with people, where opposites attract.
Oh yeah, that can
know.
definitely happen. And Bert, in your books, some of your you have shifters in your books, and the mall has some, right? That's another collection, right? So and then you have a lot of animals in your storylines as well, right? There's a lot of animal representation and some of which are not of natural origin or supernatural sometimes.
Well, they're interdimensional.
Right.
So I like to think that, like, you know, my time traveling lizards that rule, they kind of hop across dimensions and they pick and choose which animal or creature or whatever from each dimension is kind of the one that they want until they bring them all together and make not their master world, because they're kind of in all of the worlds. But yeah, and the sequel to Shiver, which is called Formless, I have the shapeshifters, and my newest book that's about to come out, which is called Fat Monster, has a different form of the same shapeshifters, and I retconned them from Lovecraft, where they're called Shoggoths. I retconned them and made them Aztec, and I renamed them Shoggothli. And then in the Fat Monster, they're made of fungus, so they're Fugatli. And I basically said, like, well, Lovecraft stole them from the Aztecs.
You know, and I apologize, I did not bring the Cthulhu mask in from the car, so I'm gonna make an appearance sometime this weekend. But as long as we're on that, you talked about Lovecraft and some of that influence. And of course, Lovecraft, even though they have Cthulhu and Shoggoth and all these other creatures so wild that our minds can't even conceive and adapt to them, it's a scientific explanation from Lovecraft, even though they're these horror supernatural beings, right? These elder gods, the great priest and things like that. but they're from other dimensional worlds within space and things, and some of that falls into yours. So when you decide to go, and I'm gonna ask all the panelists this, when you decide to go for your shapeshifter supernatural, how do you decide if you're going to do the, typical Walking Dead where there's probably a scientific explanation, or you go for we're gonna call these demons forth from the netherworld, right? Like, are your vampires scientific, or are your werewolves scientific, or is it they change face with the moon because of a curse or some sort of ability that's supernatural in origin, right? So for you, Bert, are you mostly putting in a Lovecraftian theme where it's
I kind of do a
these
little
extra dimensions?
I kind of do a little of both. Like the science came from another dimension,
Mm-hmm.
so it works because something came from somewhere else and made it work.
Mm-hmm.
Like if that hadn't come here, it wouldn't have happened. Like that's the Fat Monster book that's about to come out. That's the explanation for all this weird stuff with this fungus. Is it came over on a comet,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been sitting and it's been polluting the water supply in a certain area of the United States.
Kind of Color of Space type of influence,
Yeah,
right? So,
for hundreds of years,
Mhm.
and changing people's DNA. And I get it mixed up in like this multi-level marketing scheme that's targeting fat people, which is why it's called Fat Monster, and
it's a little like the stuff too going on.
yeah, so it takes place in like one dimension over, so it's like almost here but not quite. So there's like, instead of churches, there's like pyramids everywhere, and so it's scientific, but it's someone else's science.
And Gail, did you make those kind of decisions early on, like
Yeah.
whether or not how much science you were going to bring into your storylines, or did you unfold? Like, did you have a framework for it already?
Oh, I had a framework. It's all scientifically based, actually. I just use Victorian science to explain everything. And we, of course, know now they're wrong. But I hate to tell all y'all this, but in 200 years, we too will be completely wrong.
Yeah.
That's how science works. There is
Yeah.
no ultimate capital T truth.
No.
I have an epistemological minor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I took all of everything I knew about the Victorian era, like counterbalance theorem and weighing of the soul and all of this stuff that the Victorians were super into, because the Victorians were sort of partly, at least, obsessed with like reconciling religion and science.
With a mix of occult in there and all
Well,
the rest of
they
the
thought, well,
mysterious.
we humans obviously have souls, therefore
Yeah.
we must be able to weigh them. That's the kind of logic that goes on. And I'm like, right. It makes sense if you're a Victorian. So I was just like, so if we put vampires and werewolves into the Victorian era, they would be explaining it with their science. And that's how I explained them, with Victorian science.
Which is a really nice way to do it, because, listen, as far as I'm concerned, you can go out and read Ray Bradbury. There's not a lot of science in Ray Bradbury. In fact, he said he only wrote one really true science fiction novel. It doesn't take away from the story being fun, where there are science fiction writers like Verne who actually put a lot of real science in it, timed his 80 days and the submarines, and then, H.G. Wells shows up and goes, we got a time machine, and I'm not going to tell you how it works, but this is where we went, right? So
I would say I could put lasers on my top hats if I just explained it properly, right? That's what we do
That's
as
what we
fiction
want,
authors, we
yeah.
lie, right? So that was what I did primarily. But I thought about other things, like my main character is based on the idea of the apex predator, right? Like, so you have this idea, if vampires and werewolves exist, they prey on
now,
humans.
which one are you talking about? Which one do you consider your apex?
Well,
Your
I was
main
thinking,
character?
Alexia.
Alexia, okay.
Yeah. Preternatural is the metanatural is the ultimate apex predator, but there's only a few of those, but it's mostly preternaturals. So the idea being that you have to have a safety in place if you have an ultimate predator or a predator at the top of the food chain, otherwise you exhaust all of your resources, right? So there's a reason rabbits outbreed raptors.
Right.
Raptors just a few eggs, rabbits lots of baby bunnies, because raptors gonna eat all the baby bunnies. So therefore, right, you have this little hierarchy of production. And but if you have vampires and werewolves integrated into human society and preying upon us, like, how do you keep them under control? So you need limits in place biologically to stop vampires from making too many other vampires and werewolves from making too many other werewolves. So you make it very difficult.
Because there's so many of us to feed on.
Yes, exactly. You make it very difficult for them to procreate, and then also you give another predator, you give an apex predator who can nullify the.
So you're
vampires.
really bringing in quite a lot of, science and biology and nature into your writing to make sure it's like, hey, if this was actually an ecosystem, this is how it would have to work because our other ecosystems work this way, right?
Yeah.
You can't have more sharks than tuna, you're gonna have a problem, right? So.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So the
And this has always worried me about reading, vampire and werewolf, like urban fantasy in particular. I spend a lot of time being deeply concerned about like vampires taking over breeding practices and like that sort of a thing. So I'm just like, wait, it's too easy for you to make another vampire because we know that if you started out as a human and you're now a vampire, you're gonna overbreed. That's what humans do; they overbreed. So the vampire's gonna go around biting people, like. So you gotta.
So
you
don't
gotta
bite
stop.
everybody.
Yeah,
You know?
or you just have nothing but vampires and there's no one to eat.
Exactly. Even Lost Boys, they had more people than vampires. So and that was terrible. So the Angel, what about you? When you decide you're going to bring in a new were creature, and you had a lot of them, right? Like, is there any one you're waiting on to say, hey, I haven't written an ocelot? You might have written an ocelot actually.
No, I haven't written an ocelot yet.
So is there a creature besides the aforementioned bunnies and that you want to
Now that you
wear
mentioned
them?
an ocelot, I think I want an
Do
ocelot.
so the free use, now you have to buy the next book, the Ocelot, always for Ocelot. So the are there things you're still exploring in the world, or are you just really set up and now you just want to introduce new characters and new
Actually, I am still exploring. I actually have a griffin that I wrote as a short story, which was interesting. He's a lion griffin, and he's paired with a lion shifter, or she is paired with a lion shifter. That one was fun to write. That one was a short story that I had to flesh out and make it a full-length novella. Because I already have the cover for it, so now I have to flesh it out. It was a short story that I did for an anthology, so now I have to flesh it out.
And
so
that's
I
a
can
good
publish
question
it.
too, because a lot of authors who get picked up by a publishing house, they don't get any say in their cover, and it comes out and it's like, hey, your cover's here, and they're like, wow, that's
Yeah,
really
that's why I
good, or
self-published,
that
so I
doesn't
can
match
choose
the
my cover.
story at all. Like, where did you get this one from? When we already bought it from. It actually happened to a
Yeah.
Hugo Award-winning author when the first edition came out. He was talking at Phil Kahn. The cover came out and it had robots on it. He's like, a major part of my story is these colonies don't have robots. That's like a major plot point. Well, we had bought the art on another piece that, and he goes, until I wanted Hugo, and then they redid the covers for me. So it happens. If you self-publish, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So,
You do have to worry about your cover being
but
good,
you
though.
do have to worry about your cover being good. Yeah.
And by good, I mean accurate to the genre.
Yeah, accurate to the genre.
Not.
And that's part of the thing.
It doesn't
too.
matter what it looks like. It matters that it sells the book. It's like the label on a shampoo bottle.
That is an excellent point because regardless of what we say, we do first look at books because we see the covers and it's like, oh, that looks like something that matches what I love, right? That's
Yeah.
why you need to be.
In the 80s, all of those dragons on covers. Is the
A lot of
reason.
dragons.
Whether there was a dragon in the book or not, that didn't matter. It sold the book.
Yeah, I think in teen romance too, the faces disappeared for like a few years. Like,
Well, we had that in urban fantasy. There were
yeah,
torsos.
a lot
for
of just torsos,
ages,
right?
Just torsos.
Lots of torsos.
Yeah.
So
And tramp stamps.
No.
Lots of tramp stamps.
So,
90s. 90s urban fantasy is a lot to answer.
you can actually guess pretty accurately on most book covers what era it came from just by
Except
the cover.
Bane. Bane has had the
Yeah,
same cover.
same cover.
50 years.
Well, it's working. So, are there any new supernatural creatures you haven't introduced before, Gail, that are coming up?
Oh,
soon?
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I took the third series on the road partly because I wanted to explore the evolution of the. So I like to be rule bound. So I give a lot of conceits to my universe. One of the conceits is that pretty much every culture has a shifter of some kind and a flesh eating or blood eating. And fortunately for me, pretty much every culture does. So yes, thank you.
I can find that.
Thank you, humanity, for developing the boogeyman similarly across the breadth of space and time.
Yeah.
And so I took my characters on the road so they could meet the Vinasha, the flesh eating, the carrion eating vampires of India, or the pichitacos, the flesh-eating, the fat-sucking vampires from the Peruvian highlands and stuff like that, because I was like, let's go visit other kinds of vampires.
So, like a lot of other authors, I have to imagine that if the FBI ever got a look at your search engine, you'd be like, whoa, what's going on over there?
The biggest problem would have been when I was writing the Finishing School
Yeah.
series, because there's a lot of like assassination, poison, yeah.
You know, it's like...
Less so now. Now it's like clearly, this person writes urban fantasy, like rabbit holes down, like, how do those animals actually behave?
How long does it take an animal to eat a human being?
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
at
I
that.
wrote a necromancy story. You guys will never see it, and it. Sorry, it's not good. When I was wee. But then that was a lot of me, like, because I'm an archaeologist, like, going to the body farm research to learn exactly how decay works. And if a corpse is actually walking around after somebody decaying, open air exposure, like humidity levels, etc., how long would they be able to physically continue to move
Yeah, like
around?
maybe Arizona zombies
I have
last
questions.
longer, right? You know? Those Floridian zombies, they just moisturize and
if you're
they
in
go away,
freaking
you know?
Phoenix, you're probably fine in the middle
Yeah.
of summer for a much longer period of time.
You know?
The zombies are going to Egypt, is the moral of this story.
Then, you know,
Which makes sense.
the Egyptians had plenty of interest in life, but also interest in death, right? So it lends itself to those stories where, Bert, what did you introduce from other cultures that you didn't realize, hey, you know what, this is gonna actually work out for me, because it's a pretty wide world over there. And I know you're influenced by some of the Lovecraft stuff, but you're influenced by a lot of other,
Mostly my stuff is Mesoamerican. I mean,
A lot, right?
That's my
wheelhouse, right?
first love. Yeah, so I tend to take stuff from there first and branch out, because my ultimate would be like if the Spanish hadn't won. So
Mhm.
that's, you know, that's the world.
So those
that I
empires and
write
cultures are still around as they were,
Yeah.
more or less, right?
Yeah, so that the Spanish lost because the Aztecs had dinosaurs to fight for them.
You know?
So that's my conceit, that the lizards brought these fighting intelligent dinosaurs forward, and that when the Spanish landed, that's what they were met by. Not by people who were still closer to the Stone Age, but people who had some more of a technology, and people who had velociraptors who could talk. And it really wasn't much of a contest. So, you know, the New World is, you know, a very different place.
You know, and interesting, I follow a paleontologist on Twitch, this guy Danny Andizzo, who's excellent. A lot of science going on, but a lot of fun, because dinosaurs are fun. And dinosaurs still exist. Dinosaurs are related to birds. Birds are all dinosaurs, you know?
Yes.
You can have your Thanksgiving dinosaur,
Yeah.
you know?
Which is why you shouldn't trust them. Or
Yeah,
should
Yeah,
highly
I used to
trust
have
them.
parrots.
I do trust Lamar, and shout out to Jessica, because Lamar may be making an appearance this weekend too. So she carries her time-traveling budgie with her to events. And we might see it on a panel tomorrow. Lamar's been on panels with us, so come join us for that one. So you get into the supernatural world, you explore, you create your own universes, right? And then, when have you had to say to yourself, okay, what do I do next that will just blow my readers' minds away? Have you ever thought of that? Like, did I limit myself early on because I made too many rules for myself? I want to break some of them. Or do you just say, you know what, I'm keeping the rules and I'm working around? You know, because there are some, and I won't mention them by name, there are some fantasy series where these are the rules until they're not the rules anymore, you know?
Never blow up the earth in chapter 1. You might
Yes,
need it later.
Yes, exactly. So Douglas Adams didn't listen to Gail on that one. You know?
In my case, sorry, I'm suddenly occupied with folding a scarf. I don't know why.
But you
How do you
have
think?
a certain set of rules, right?
Of course,
your
yeah.
universe, right?
I'm very rule bound.
Yeah.
I like to be rule bound. There's a reason people are LARP and RPG in my universe all the time, because it's like really pretty clear cut. But yeah, I mean, like conservation of mass is one of my rules, and mammalian transformation is one of my rules, at least in the Parasolvers. So like you can't like. No bird shapeshifters, for example. Sorry, can't be human and bird. You have to be human and mammal. Also no supernatural creatures until suddenly no. But wait for it, right? Like supernatural, as in fantastical creatures. So like only creatures that actually existed, that kind of thing. But like conservation of mass bit me in the ass when I was writing the urban fantasy, because I was like, all right, well, okay, conservation of density. So like, because I really wanted to have kitsune, and kitsune, very small, which means they are small in human form as well, which also works fine for the canon, but also very dense, very, very dense when they are foxes. Like little black hole animals, because I was like, otherwise
The
they're
footprints are
too
very
small
deep.
as humans, exactly.
Walking across the mud, we know where that was.
Like, damn it. Also, you have a dragon shifter, very, very light when they're a dragon, very, very heavy when they're humans. Just stomp, 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 stomp. Then put dragon shifter in Paper City and just screw yourself
So
over.
you're actually working out some of the science, like, oh yeah.
I do spend a lot of time thinking about logistics.
I have friends who do physics. I gotta make sure the conservation of mass is
I
going
actually
on.
have DNA like formulas written down for regular humans, vampires, werewolves,
Oh.
preternaturals, and metanaturals. Like I have it all. I have a whole like numeric.
Do your
I'm
readers ever get to see that? I've never
no,
seen that.
that's a timeline as well,
Oh,
which
okay.
my readers are always like thirsty
You want to
for.
see that, don't you? All of you want to see a lot of head shaking. They're like, yeah.
But there's still secrets to be revealed, so I can't like post all of this because it's all like.
I've heard those.
Yeah.
I know, yeah, but then I'd have to go back and remember what I've said and what I haven't said.
That's true.
Very complicated.
Yeah, I have problems with that in the morning sometimes.
Does everybody know that character was born then? I don't remember if I said that or not.
Yes. Well, that's also the truth. How many of us have gone back to a piece that we hadn't touched in a long time? It's like, oh yeah, I changed the main character's name in like chapter 4 for some reason. Didn't change it back in the other 3 chapters. It's not going to go to Leonard or well. So.
People will post my quotes online and I'll be like, did I write that? Well, wasn't I clever? That was me? Cool.
It was either Gail or Dorothy Parker. One of us two wrote this,
Who said that?
and it had to do with tea, so we're giving the nod to Gail.
And there's a werewolf, so it must be me.
Exactly. So have you found that? Bert, when you're doing like a Cthulhu like Lovecraftian thing, you want to stay in that universe or close
No.
enough to it, or you push the boundaries?
I want to push the boundaries.
Yes,
'Cause there's too much problematic stuff with Lovecraft,
Well, yeah,
with
there is.
racism
There's no
and
question,
everything,
right?
and
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
Like my thing, like I love Deep Ones, but his interpretation of Deep Ones was a racist one, and I love Deep Ones, and mine is exactly the opposite. So I want to pick and choose what I use from there, and I don't care if that's
And then push the rest of it away.
yeah, pretty
So-
much. Yeah, I mean, some of his stuff was absolutely wonderful and mind blowing, but some of it was
Oh yeah,
very
no, listen,
cringe. Very cringe.
Definitely problematic.
And
that-
so I want to take what I can use and build on it, like the Shoggoths, and taking the Shoggoths and being like, there's a Shoggoth, and then I renamed it Shoggothly with an X, and made it Aztec, and now it's mine, and I do what I want with my Shoggothly and say, yeah, Lovecraft has a thing like that, and that's because he named it after mine. And there we go.
That's good enough for me. Yeah. So, listen, it's the difference between plagiarism and research. Is research, you just take a lot of things from different people. And publish it, see? So, and you know what, that is interesting when you talked about science, Gil, and how it doesn't actually finish. We don't get finished, right? You know what? Go find out that the most common way you get ulcers is a bacteria, and you can get a Nobel Prize for that, even though for decades before everybody else was wrong. This is how science works. Like sometimes we're wrong, and 200 years from now we're gonna be like, oh my
Everything will be wrong.
Yeah.
goodness, those people in the
What was-
2020s.
I can't believe they sat with tablecloths. Didn't they know that the tablecloths were killing them?
That's
Yeah.
and we got tablecloths behind us too, so we're being doubly exposed.
So unhealthy.
Yes, it really is secondhand tablecloth. It's terrible. So all of you, when you go to the vending rooms, those are approved tablecloths. They are no longer vending. Right? So
Those are safe.
if you come over to buy my jewelry or my books, just that tablecloth was
I got rid of the tablecloth that came with my table and brought my own,
Yeah.
a safe tablecloth from home.
Or a summoning tablecloth for the next
Yeah.
elder god. You never know.
And you know, it's funny though that you say that, Gail, because how many of us who create from our imaginations and sometimes influence the real world, you could make a killer tablecloth story, right? Like it could be done, right? And if you write it interestingly enough, people will be happy to have. We had killer tomatoes. You know, these are things that you can do in fiction, right?
Eat snakes on a plane. It's
Yeah.
terrifying.
Snakes on a plane, right? And I hope they were not on the plane that you took out. So,
I don't mind snakes. Snakes are fine.
you know, snakes are
Birds.
fine.
I'm telling you, birds are the evil ones.
I will tell you though, at what event Jessica and I were vending at adjacently, and I had my Cthulhu mask on, and Lamar, her budgie, just kind of flipped out. It was
Well,
really,
good
really
for
got
him.
scared. Yeah. And
Yeah,
we're
I don't
wondering.
want to misgender a budgie.
No, it's Lamar's a ladybird, so and has made appearances. But it is an interesting thing for us too, is what animals and creatures we love, right? Like, you know, there are people, in particular, a friend of mine who's writer Thames, and she writes a lot of vampires, sexy vampires. She was on a panel, Vampires or Zombies. She goes, well, the story about the zombies isn't about the zombies. Most of the time, it's about people avoiding the zombies, but the vampire stories are about vampires. And I have to say that's true. You get to have a lot of fun with your vampires. You know, they're the driving force in your aristocratic part of your universe, right? So, and there's a lot of political intrigue, both on the vampire level and on the mortal level, right? So, you know, at what point do you make sure that how do you keep the vampires becoming too powerful and uninteresting?
Well,
Is it the rivalries?
You make them capricious. That, in my
Yeah.
case, you make them unpredictable and fabulous, and like wildly excited about random stuff, like the height of everybody's colors. You know, easily distracted by a waistcoat, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I will sacrifice everything on the table for funny. Like that's the bottom line for me, is like, can I make it funny? Then I will figure out how to explain it for the in-world universe rules.
Yeah, and that's sometimes a challenge, right? Because you want to bring real odds to the story, but you also want to
I do not.
understand it.
No, I like to say something will explode, and then my characters will run around, and then they'll sit down, have tea, and talk about it. It's terribly
actually do that,
perilous.
yes.
Like, oh god, the fear of it all. But that's not why people are not reading my books for excitement. They're reading my books because they love the characters and the world building, and they want to sit down and have tea with
have a
them.
lot of fun. Yeah,
And
they
it's
do.
going to make them laugh, and everything will be fine in the end, and nobody's going to die.
Angel, what are you doing when your characters and for your
Maybe.
readers? Do you want to evoke something out of them? Are you trying to read a message, or are you just like, you know, I'm telling a good story and they get out of it what they want,
I'm just telling a good story.
right? So the reader can take from it what they want. You're not
Yeah.
sending a message out to them.
No, I'm not sending a message out.
Now sometimes you are though, right, Bert? Sometimes you're saying, hey,
Fat Monster definitely has messages in
there's
it.
there's definitely some messages, right?
Well, yeah, because I mean, I used to be fat,
Mhm.
and I wanted to explore that, and the story came to me, and I wrote it. But you know, like the Mickey Crow series doesn't really have that many messages. It's just I wanted to write a series that was easy to write and episodic in a way that you could pick up any book.
Yeah,
And read
and
it,
that's sometimes
and
fun,
read
right?
it, and read it without being like, I don't know who these people are, and I didn't read the last book, and now I don't know what's happening. I want them to be kind of self-contained while still referencing that stuff happened to them in the past,
Mhm.
and you know, with mostly the same characters, and you know, just a small group of friends who are going out and doing fun things that have to do with the supernatural in kind of a near future world where they're meeting just really weird things. Like
You know,
the
and
next one's gonna be robots, so.
Oh, and everybody loves robots, in fact, in all their forms, right? And we have a lot of interesting ones, like, you know, what you call them, but like Westworld was really well done, the new Westworld was really well done, right? Those type of things. So I think that's another interesting thing, is when you introduce the supernatural to science, because we do have some worlds out there where they overlap, right? And definitely in your world, this is clearly the case. And the social norms that, you know, we expect through our characters. I usually write, I don't know, with me it really depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Sometimes I want to write humor, and sometimes I want to write something really serious, but my serious stuff winds up always devolving into humor. So it's a tough line to back off of when you can know you entertain a reader. And you can tell also, Gail, with some of your titles, like, you know, the Custard Protocol, for example, right? Like, you know
what you're in for.
you know what you're in for,
Someone
right?
may die, but it's off screen
But
and
it-
in a vat of custard.
Yes, there's gonna be custard involved. So,
There will be a loincloth and grapes. I don't know, but that's how it'll happen.
and then, for the rest of you, what do you have coming up that's your next thing coming out? You mentioned, Bert, that your latest work, is it out yet, or is it?
Fat Monster, it was
Fat
supposed to be
Monster, yeah.
out for this weekend, but between Amazon not shipping things and then there was a family problem with my editor, it should be out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so we'll look for that.
And then the next Mickey Crow will be called Metal. Like I said, it'll be about like kind of a BattleBots robot thing, and that should be out this summer.
And Angel, what do you have that's new that we're expecting?
The 7th book in the next book, it's the 6th book in my Nola Shifter series, comes out on the 17th of this month. And then I have a book coming out in September that is part of a shared world. It's called Jaeger. It's set in Thorn Bay, Alaska. It is part of like I said, it's part of a shared world. It's called the Thorn Bay series.
Shared world with other authors.
With other authors, yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I remember
That
the
comes out in
first
September.
shared world I remember reading was way back when, I think Thieves World came out, and they decided, you know what, we're all gonna write into the same universe.
What about
And-
Dragonlance?
Yeah, maybe Dragonlance, I don't know which was
Freaking
first.
Mercedes
I mean.
Lackey. There's a lot
Yeah.
of shared worlds out
Oh,
there.
there's a lot of shared worlds now, yeah, geez, there's a lot of shared worlds. So, and you, Gail, what do you have coming out that we should know about?
Very excited. I have Tinker's Star Song coming out, which is a 3-book, and they are all written, and I'm going to release them
Really?
relatively quickly. So you will not have to wait. And Tinker's Star Song is the aliens are coming for us, and they want our K-pop. It is it's about an alien race taking over the galaxy with the entertainment industry and whether art can be weaponized for conquering. I got very interested in the Hallyu wave, so and it's so much fun and I'm so excited about it.
And all three are coming out at the same time? you said?
No, not at the same time. They'll
But they're all
probably be
written.
every couple of months. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So join my newsletter. I brought a sign-up sheet if you're not on my newsletter,
Yes,
because that is how you will know. And let me tell you, I'm like dealing with a cover art designer right now, and the covers are going to be so good. I'm so excited. So yeah. That
Did
is what
any
I'm
of you
doing.
know this was coming out, this 3 series?
Some of you
knew,
are on
you
the
knew,
chair.
Some of you knew.
It's once a month. It's chatty, hilarious, and fun, and I always put lots of exciting things in there for you.
I was hoping it was breaking news, I could tell David.
And it's the only place I talk about like the things I'm writing and things I'm working on when I'm not in person, because I don't like writing checks I can't cash. So, and then the other thing I brought, in case you guys are interested, is bookmarks that have all of my books on one side and all of the books I recommend written by other people on the other side,
This
or
is
at
a
least
brilliant idea.
the most commonly recommended ones on the other side. So, come take those because I don't want to transport them back across the country.
Yeah, and you know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do keep a notebook, which I haven't used in a while, one of the little Moleskines, and I ask people to recommend me just one book, and I've never gotten a bad one. You know, because when people have to just think
one
about
book.
one book, it's really hard, right?
And
They
you guys-
always give you a good one. So,
This is the newsletter if you want to sign up digitally. See how steady I can hold it. Anyway.
honestly, so we got exciting stuff coming out. When do you think that's gonna be out?
Well, right now I'm waiting on other people. That's always the case with indie. So I'm waiting on the cover art designer, my dev editor, and the copy editor. But I am hoping at least middle of the year, if not a little bit before then, and then it'll be. Boop, 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 boop. I'm so excited about the series, you guys. It's so much. This is the series I wrote in the middle of the pandemic when I was like, I can't write anything. And then my brain was like, you have to leave Earth. And I was like, I have to leave Earth! You're so right! And I was like, aliens, recruiting a barista on a moon. Let's do it! Because he can sing.
Oh, by the way, there's a new mission for those of you who were here early. We were wondering where Gail was, so I went to go check to make sure she could find the room. And the mystery of Gail was part of the mystery, which was solved. But the mystery of where that room is on the 3rd floor is not
Remains a
solved.
mystery.
So if any of you want to, go.
No, it's an elder god monster,
Yeah.
that 3rd room. I don't believe it exists. I really did search for it. I also have no sense of direction, so I'm lying. But am I? We'll
You can
find
put
out
that room on your
tomorrow night.
Instagram so we know where it is and it exists. That would be helpful.
But my
Otherwise,
coffee
it's-
clutch is in that room, so hopefully we'll all eventually either be eaten by the elder god or find the room or both.
It's interesting because and I know you've said this at.
What have I said? Oh God.
Uh,
I said what?
I will tell you, one of the great interviews you've done was with Travis Sivard. I love every moment of Travis, and I follow Travis. I've gamed online with
Travis
Travis.
is a friend of mine, so
So,
that's
It was an excellent interview. But one of the things is, Gail saying, when you go to conventions which are not like this, like a regular pop
Sci-fi.
culture sci-fi event convention, your fans are pretty easily spotted,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like that line is probably Gail Carriger convention.
Oh yeah, always. Like I'll go walk on or whatever. I can look and I'll be like, oh, there they are. They're always talking to each other. Which, let me tell you, George R.R. Martin fans, don't talk to each other. I did an event with George R.R. Martin once, and it was not half my fans and half his fans. Oh no, it was Pat Rothfuss, and it was mostly Rothfuss fans, and mine had like snuck in. But boy, were mine just like blah 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 blah. There was a bar. My fans were the ones at that bar, and then and his fans were all like huddling over their enormous fat books, and then mine were like we've already been signed. Like we just came to talk to you, and looking fabulous. And I was like, yes, those are my fans. I can always spot them. It's great.
That's because you write stuff that people laugh at.
Yeah.
And everybody and people like just assume you're friendly in the line because everybody's well, you like Gail, I like Gail, we must like each other. Begin a friendship. It's great. It's like my it's my favorite thing. But yeah, I also have to warn everybody. Like I was at University Bookstore at one point, and I was like, it's 150 people. He's like, okay, so your signing line's gonna take an hour and a half, and I was like, my signing line will take 2.5 hours because I have to talk to all of them because I actually really like my fans, and we have conversations, and it was exactly how long it took. But yeah, that's the other thing is it'll be like me, Martin, and somebody else, and my line will be shorter than fucking George R.R. Martin, but it takes the same time frame.
Yeah, but the other thing too is when you have a line like that and fans who are so passionate about your world, and this is the same thing too when we're like at Steampunk events, right? Because you get to speak to everybody and ask them, hey, where'd you get those goggles? Where'd you make that? Where'd you get the corset? Where'd you get the gloves? Because they have little bows on your,
Little bows.
So I mean, some of it we get because we know the vendors, but other stuff it's like brand new. Like, Bert, where did you get those earrings, right?
Well, and this is the secret about books that, like, the book industry in general, whether it's indie or traditional, doesn't talk about, which is the thing that sells books the most is word of mouth. Like, we all know this. So, like, if you love a book, tell someone else about it. Like, that's all I'm saying is, like, spread the love. Like, you read one of our books and you like it, just tell a friend.
And people,
it's honestly the best thing you can do for
people
an author.
were coming to one of David's events, and I said to him, listen, when you go to the event, if you don't know how to make chit-chat, just ask somebody about their outfits. Everybody loves in Steampunk loves to talk about
Ask somebody
that.
what they've read recently
What
that they
they've
really
read
love,
recently.
or what they've watched recently.
Yes,
like, people love
exactly.
talking about their passions.
And regarding that, why do you think there was such a surge in passions for Supernatural? Because we've seen like a boom in the last, including Supernatural. Who are Supernatural fans here? Any Supernatural fans? Yeah, it's a pretty good overlap, right, with this group. So it's Sam and Dean, and and suggestions of male romance.
We're not going to talk about that. I was there. Somebody was interviewing me just after the Castiel catastrophe, shall we call it? And I was interviewed on it on this podcast that asks you to pick the thing that you're most fascinated by in the sci-fi fantasy world. And I was like, I don't know if any of y'all are on Tumblr, but this shit show is the most interesting thing ever to happen to me in my whole life. And I don't watch Supernatural, but watching that like whiplash of canonization, decanonization, kill the gay, I was like, woo! Nobody here knows what I'm talking about. I was like, wait, who are the youngest people in the room?
But we
Welcome
do,
to
right?
the Tumblr demographic. Yes, but anyway, Yeah, that was a very long way of saying the queers were up in arms,
Yeah, up in arms.
and they should have been.
So, yeah.
But it was still delightful. Where are we going with this?
Well, no, I was just saying, like, we have a huge explosion in pop culture over the last 20 years in supernatural beings. All these shows, Good Omens came to TV. We've got some of the superhero movies overlap with it, right? I mean, you've got mystical origins for Moon Knight and all of those Egyptian gods. You have all of this stuff coming into pop culture at a time, and I think part of it is the quality of the production is so much easier to do a high quality production.
Yes.
So you can watch these shows and like the demons look real, right? Like the things come to life, and you can produce it the way we want to see it. But I think there's also a huge surge in the interest in all of these creatures that we didn't know of, right? So, and some of these shows bring in creatures that, everybody knows vampires, werewolves, but some of the more obscure creatures are now brought to the forefront because we have all this pop culture that's bringing us to supernatural television programs, But you didn't watch Supernatural, you just know about
I did not.
the...
But I pay attention. I pay
yeah,
attention.
but some of your fans did, some
Yes,
of
I
these
have a large
really-
crossover, especially in Tumblr.
And so, but why? Is it because the production is so doable, or because there's still so many stories to tell?
I think, well, I have private theories on the rise of steampunk or the rise of fascination in one kind of supernatural creature or another, which would take more statistical and data analysis than my
Right.
lazy ass really wants to do, but I probably could. But I tend to think that when a zeitgeist fear in a country is of, say, mob rule or something like that, you tend to kind of a rise in zombie fiction. When the zeitgeist rule is aristocrats have with too much money, then you have fear of vampires, and then you have CEO billionaires, and you have sexualization of vampires. So it's just sort of like the monster that the culture is fascinated with tends to tell you more about the culture than it does
That is
about
sometimes
the
very
monster.
true, right? Yeah. So Angel, do you see how we have so many more shifters stories now? We see everywhere. You see more and more and more. People can't enough of it, right? There's no
It seems to
endless.
be getting saturated.
You think so?
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah.
What about you, Bert? Are there stories that you're still looking to tell because you haven't seen them before, or is there enough stuff going out there you're like, wow, that's really hard to find no idea is truly new, right? So probably at least not mine. So
There are no.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I
no
have
idea.
8 Mickey Crow books already planned.
Oh, 8? That many?
Yeah.
Wow.
8. So,
All
and
right.
then I have a spin-off series that takes place, that's a steampunk version, where they're in a different dimension. That's, if you've read the books where Mickey's always drawing a comic, I want to write those novels, the comics as novels, where they're all steampunk versions of themselves.
Oh,
With
so is
a
a story in a story?
Yeah.
Oh, that's always interesting. Any
So,
novelists in your stories?
I don't write about writers now.
No, you
We're
don't write about
very boring.
and then that's gonna be a spin-off series, so I plan on just going forever with this, as long as I have a couple of readers. Which I have one here today, so that's good.
Listen, we could always use more crows. There's
But, I mean, as far as shifters go, I think part of the love for shifters is, don't we always kind of wanna be somebody else?
That is a good question, and if you look at it, when you talk about dual identities, that is an excellent question about shifters and supernatural creatures in general. How did you decide as authors whether or not these beings have 2 lives, you have the Superman Clark Kent type thing going on, or you're just always you, and you just happen to be a vampire, right? So, in your world, Gail, it's known that vampires exist, right?
Yeah,
So
everyone's out.
everyone's out, right? So
Not closeted.
Not closeted vampires. So the Angel, what about you? Do your shifters have to keep 2 identities?
No.
Because within their worlds, everybody knows they're shifters, right?
Shifters they're not necessarily common knowledge, but they're not hidden at the same time. People know that they exist kind of in the peripheral, but they don't know exactly who is a shifter and who isn't.
That's how the Muggles feel about steampunks, by the way. They know we exist and they spot us once in a while. I think there's a wedding going on this weekend here as well, so.
Excellent.
It'll prove interesting for them to see us.
One of them asked me, is this some sort of religious group?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, there's a cult aspect.
Yes, with a lot of tea, yeah.
I think that's the other side of the shifter thing, is it's appealing in that it's both this idea that you could be a completely other person or another creature, and that you could find your pack, or you can find your group of either other shifters or an actual werewolf pack or whatever. So it's bundled with this like alter identity, second identity, or secret identity, and found family concept, and I think that that's very appealing.
How many out shifters do we have here? Anybody?
You don't have to confess.
No, see, this is mostly secret shifters. There's a lot of them out. Yeah. I mean, there's quite a bunch of them out there. So, and then the moon's getting closer to full, is it not? I saw a moon today.
Tomorrow night.
So tomorrow night, is it full tomorrow night?
Yep.
Oh, it's gonna be fun. So the so regarding that too, how do you deal with that in your stories? Is like when you have these tropes like the werewolf, right? Either changing on their own accord or changing according to uncontrolled circumstances, right? So, and do you ever decide to say, well, in our world, the werewolves can all change at will except for this person, and they gotta go through like hell, right? It's like, do you decide that early on when you're writing it, or did you create your world and most of the rules before book one, or did you just hop right in and say, you know what, I'm gonna kind of do this as I go? Or is it a combination?
Are you asking me this question? Well, mine are forced to change in the original series, and then the etheric particles called quintessence are released in the urban fantasy series, and it changes the way the biology functions because supernatural characteristics and abilities are linked to a allergic reaction to atmospheric particles.
More science.
More science! That's how it works, in a nutshell. So essentially, if you release more of the particles, it can act on some, like an overexposure to an allergen. So you can...
And then, that's clearly something that's like very different in your world than most of the stuff. That doesn't come from the traditional culture.
No, it was just me being scientific about it. Like, how do I explain this with science? And how does it tie into the ether atmosphere that the Victorian world functioned over, that the Victorians explained the atmosphere with, that I put like etheric currents in because I want my dirigibles to be traveling around the world, and like all of this other stuff that like is mostly explored in the Custer Protocol series. But then I was like, well, how do we make that science? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. How did World War II impact this? It's just me. I get very, like, history, science wrapped up in everything. What was the question?
That was basically it. Like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with like, we got a shifter that has to shift versus
I made
doesn't,
that.
and then you decided to change your world.
I made that decision because most of my werewolves are male, and I wanted to give them PMS.
And then there you go. So
it's just really bad, and because they're dudes, like visible for all the world to deal with. Right? My PMS just manifests as me turning into an actual bitch.
And Angel, what about you? Did you make any limitations on the type of hybrids you can have? Because you have wear this with wear that, and where does that go?
No, so far I haven't made any limitations.
It's open season. In all ways.
Because it's a question like, do I just leave this open? Because and these where people can interact and still have children, offspring of their own, or have lives together, or is there rules like, oh, you're not allowed to hang out with the werelinks? Everybody knows that.
Matter of fact, the Ghost Point pack is made of different species of shifters. There's lions, there's tigers, they have the bear, they have the wolf, they have jaguar.
Mm-hmm.
That is the pack. And the griffin. The griffin is a part of their pack.
Which is a true like supernatural creature in and
Yes.
of its own, right?
It's not
Yes.
aware.
It's not aware. It's a were-griffin? No.
No,
No.
it's a griffin.
Okay.
It's not
It's a griffin.
aware, it's a griffin.
The were-griffin comes in the next. Yeah.
She's part of their pack.
So she doesn't have a human form?
No, she does have a human
Oh,
point.
okay,
She
okay,
is
okay.
aware. She is
I was
a
like,
shifter.
otherwise you're in bestiality territory, which there's
Yeah,
a
but
readership
she's
for
a-
that, but
she's
that's
a
an interesting
shifter.
place to
That
go.
is, there is a
She's
readership for
a
that.
shifter too.
Sure is.
Yeah, she is a shifter too.
What rule is
But
that? I forget what rule.
when she
Monster
shifts, she
Horn.
shifts into
34.
she shifts into a lion griffin. Because most packs are one species of animal, but the way the Ghost Point pack started out is a security group, a personal security group. That's how they got their start.
Yeah, so this takes place in
New Orleans.
New Orleans, okay.
Yeah,
So-
it's my Nola Shifter series.
Yeah, most of your stuff starts out in England, right? So,
No, it starts out in New
no,
Orleans.
not New Angel, Gail. Most of
Oh,
your stuff
Gail.
starts out in England, right?
Yeah, UK.
Yeah,
Yeah,
UK,
yeah.
right? And your stuff is southern based? Are you from there? Did you decide to write that?
No, I'm not from New Orleans. I was raised in the South, but New Orleans, I visited New Orleans for an entire month in 2005 and fell in love with the city. And it just kind of, that's just where, it's funny because when I first wrote Wild Lilies, which is the first book, it was supposed to be set in Montana, and I was talking with an author friend of mine. I was starting to write the book, and I jokingly made the comment, maybe I should set it in New Orleans, and she's like, yeah, go ahead and do it.
And it
That's
happened.
how it ended up being, it was supposed to be one book, and it ended up being a set of 12. I've got 12 books planned. I've got the covers already. I've got each book's loosely plotted out. I don't plot. I have the general idea for each book. And like I said, I've just got book 6 written. I have book 7 started, and I have book 8 started. So eventually they'll get written.
You know, Bert, in your story, and I won't give away too much, in your Mer people stories, the one I read, it was a fairly isolated environment, right? I don't remember though. I thought of it as New England, although I may have done that just because I know your.
No, it was in Massachusetts.
To Massachusetts,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and you use that actually quite a bit, right, in terms of your backgrounds.
Yeah, because I've always lived in Connecticut,
Mhm.
so, and that does tie back into the Lovecraft thing where everything was set around here, but that's where I'm from, and a lot of people do tend to think that New England is kind of spooky for
Yeah, it's definitely
whatever
good,
reason, and it's comfortable for me. I know what it looks like. I don't have to go on YouTube and watch a video to see what New England looks like. I can go in my yard and be like, what does it look like? Okay, whatever. If I need to know what the beach looks like, I can drive to the beach. So I don't have to do a huge amount of research. I mean, eventually I might want to set somewhere else, but for now I'm trying to kind of keep them local. Like the next one's going to be set more in Boston.
Okay. And speaking of beasts of all natures, sometimes on your you post those Critigram videos, and there's wildlife all over your property. So-
Well, yeah, because
Yeah.
I live on half an acre, but there's 12 acres behind me of woods, so we just put up all the cameras and see what comes. We got like bobcat, we got a fox, we got all kinds of
Yeah, it is kind of
critters.
interesting to see what came
Yeah.
by in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
So,
it's
so
kinda
do you
fun.
get to England at all, Gail? Yeah. How? with any
Yeah, my mom's
frequency?
British. Well, I went there a lot as a kid,
Mhm.
and because my parents would just ship me off and get rid of me to the grandparents where I would go. Yeah, I was one of those kids who got on the plane with the label around her neck.
This is how authors are made.
She should have known.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I have dual citizenship, so I did one of my
Oh, did you?
degrees over
Yeah,
there, and I lived there for a while. So yeah, I haven't been back in a little while, but I get back pretty regularly.
Mhm. And of course, Victorian England looked different than it does today.
Very,
At least-
very different.
Yeah, although parts of it have been around a lot
Well, I
longer than
have
Victorian England.
a lot of Baedekers. That's
Yeah.
very helpful. Recommend Baedekers if you can get a hold of them from the time period that you want to write in, because it gives you maps of London,
Mhm.
which are very different from what London looks
Oh
like
yeah,
now.
the street name change.
Correct street names and all that sort of thing. And then I was laughing when Bert was talking because the amount of research that I had to do for the book where I'm gonna say it's no, it's not competence. It must be imprudence. the book where Prudence, yeah, it's Imprudence, where Prudence goes back to Egypt, and I decided to go to the source of the Nile. There was a lot of like, because it was not just like, what does it look like, but what does it look like from the air? Because we took a dirigible. And I was like, well, shoot. The Sud is the most interesting thing if you're at all into geology or into like zones. It's like, look up what the Sud looks like from above. It's totally fascinating. I'm now obsessed with taking that biplane trip at some point in my life. So that was, but it was a lot of watching videos, lots of videos of what it looked like. And I'm assuming since you cannot do anything with the Sud, that it looks exactly the same as it did 200 years ago. It was slightly less water.
And I'll be doing an introduction to genealogy panel on Sunday. And some of those topics will come up, like street names. They change. You know, towns where you lived in, the county your ancestors lived in, the state your ancestors lived in, was a territory when your grandpa was a young lad. All those things will be brought up because when you're doing those research, you're like, oh wow, this changed a lot. Like, you know, parts of Manhattan didn't exist. You know?
I will say, there are things that don't change that much. One of the things I do is I tend to only take my characters to places that I have actually traveled to. And one of those reasons is I feel like the air and the light, and there's certain aspects, the light in particular, of a location that you don't really get with research. You really only get it if you've been to that place and spent some time in that place. So like a lot of the places, like the physical locations I put into my books, the cities or whatever, are places I've traveled to because I feel safer with the sort of atmospheric. Like, yes, things will have changed. Obviously, industrialization makes a big difference. But
yeah, sure.
The smell, and like I said, like the lean of the light, which is, you know, the tilt of the earth on its axis and all of those sorts of things, is just like Florence is orange. If you've ever been to Florence, you're like, it is an orange city. You're like, the light is just warmer and oranger there. And I don't know how else to describe it except that it is like very similar to my home, which is California, in terms of the kinds of things that grow there, the vegetation, the layout. Like there's reason wine country is wine country is wine country,
sure,
wherever
sure.
it is. But the light is different there. It's a lot more like, say, Santa Fe or something like that. It's just a different, but Santa Fe is a clearer, brighter light. So, you know, there are things like that you don't really, these senses you don't really get as a writer unless you've actually been to a place. So that's
and you'll put it in your stories, obviously.
Yeah,
reflect
yeah. And when I was getting offers a lot for like weird, and I still occasionally do for like weird, but like unexpected international conventions and trips, because outside of the U.S. there just aren't as many as there are here. I often will pick and choose an international trip based on whether I want to go there to research, to take and then occasionally I go to Singapore and promise the Minister of Culture that Singapore is going to be in the next book. And I have to put Singapore in the book because I made a promise to a major governmental state body. But, you know, things like that. So in other words, I will actually now travel to a place I've never been to before simply because I might want to take my characters
So
there.
I could write the mayor of Florence and say, hey, you put me up,
I'll put you in
your
a book.
city is going to be in
I don't
the
think
book.
Florence has a problem being in
Yeah,
literature,
probably
I hate to
not,
tell you.
yeah.
Ian Foster's kind of got you
Yeah.
covered.
Although,
already.
you know, when you talk about places, all of these places are really well known for the supernatural. London, of course, definitely New Orleans, right?
Oh, yeah.
And definitely New England, especially places along the water, right? So you got plenty of lighthouses, you got plenty of spooky tales, you have, you know, all these mythos surrounding it. You have Salem, you know, which lends itself to whole storylines in and of itself, and festivals, which I haven't been to, but a lot of our brethren have. I know some of the people in this room have. You know, story in the supernatural world, you can have the city be like this supernatural entity unto itself, right? That
Oh,
has
yes,
a
you
feeling
can.
unto itself, right?
Oh,
So,
sure.
You know, and
Look what Butcher did to Chicago.
yeah, that's true.
Ask a
Yeah.
Chicagoan about it sometime.
Yeah,
Talk a lot.
That's Jim Butcher, for anybody who doesn't know, and mostly the Dresden series,
Yeah.
you know, and Dresden series tends to be a lot of fun. So but Chicago, and you know, that's interesting too, because Anne Rice is well known for her Louisiana stuff, right? And What Do You Call It takes place there too. What's the vampire series that takes place in mostly?
True Blood.
True Blood, right? So, and you know, it's funny too, because Manhattan has has that too, to an extent, but not to the extent that these other cities do. You
People
know?
like to put superhero teams in Manhattan so
Yes,
they
they
can
do.
burn it down,
Yes, we do that a lot.
crash into it.
we do that a lot. So,
It's like Tokyo.
It's 9:23.
yeah, Godzilla. What? We
It's
have time?
9:23.
It's
Oh,
9:23.
we're
We're
late.
wait.
We're
Isn't
over.
there supposed to be another panel coming in?
9:15.
Well, I want to thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Angel, Bert, and myself, we have tables in the vending room. If you're interested in books, I know Gail, you're not vending this
I'm
weekend.
wandering around. You can find me if you want a book signed, or you can come to one of my panels with a book and I will sign it afterwards. I have a bunch of things tomorrow. I don't have any panels.
Look at the schedule.
Lots of things.
Lots of
And
things.
come and sign for my newsletter and get a bookmark, please.
Okay.
Please.
I am gonna. Thank you so much. And did we get a picture together already?